Hi guys, I hope you're doing really well. My name is Sarah and welcome to What the Horror, the channel where we talk about horror movies old and new. Also, welcome to a new episode of Truly Horror, the series where we talk about the true stories, the true events, and true crime surrounding certain horror movies. The behind-the-scenes stuff that is often stranger and scarier than the movies themselves. Today, we're talking about the tragic true event that happened while filming on the set of the 1994's The Crow. The Crow originated as a supernatural superhero comic book series that was created by James O'Barr. In 1978, O'Barr had enlisted in the Marines and was due to be stationed in Germany. He and his fiancée moved to Berlin, but tragically, his fiancée Beverly was killed, hit by a drunk driver. O'Barr then began working on The Crow as a way to process his grief and as a form of therapy. In 1993, the comic series was adapted into a movie. It was written for the screen by David Shaw and John Shirley and was directed by Alex Proyas. The Crow stars Brandon Lee, Ernie Hudson, Tony Todd, and Michael Wincott. On Devil's Night in the city of Detroit, a gang of henchmen working for crime boss Top Dollar head to the apartment of rock musician Eric Draven and his fiancée Shelley. They've been sent there by Top Dollar to kill both Eric and Shelley because they've been protesting forced evictions of people living in their apartment building. The gang attack and assault Shelley, and when Eric returns home, they shoot him and throw him from the apartment window. Sergeant Albrecht arrives at the scene and leaves for the hospital with Shelley. He also meets a young girl named Sarah who is close friends with both Eric and Shelley. He tries to reassure Sarah, but Shelley later dies from her injuries. 1 year later, a crow taps on the gravestone of Eric and resurrects him. According to The Crow's producer, Jeff Most, The Crow is acting like a hand of God that allows a person taken to heaven to return and put something horrible right. Eric, in a state of confusion, returns to his apartment, which is now abandoned and derelict. While there, he has flashbacks to his and his fiancée's murders, and when he discovers that he can heal from any wounds, he gears up and sets out into the night to seek revenge on those responsible. Eric has a telepathic connection with the Crow, who helps him locate the first gang member, Tintin, who Eric finds, stabs, and kills. He then finds Funboy, who was the one who shot him, hooking up with Sarah's mum, Darla. Eric kills Funboy by forcing him to overdose and tells Darla that her daughter needs her to be there for her. Eric then pays Sergeant Albrecht a visit, who tells Eric that he had stayed by Shelley's side for 30 hours before she died. Before he leaves, Eric absorbs those 30 hours of pain that Shelley felt from Albrecht. Eric also pays a visit to Sarah, saving her from being run over. He alludes to who he is, but leaves before she can be sure. Eric's next visit is to T-Bird, who he kidnaps and kills in an explosion in T-Bird's own car. And finally, Eric goes to Top Dollar's criminal lair, where he's currently holding a meeting to plan the next Devil Knight's criminal activity. A shootout starts where the last member of the gang is killed, but Top Dollar escapes with his henchman and his sister/lover. Yup. Sister Lover believes that if they find the Crow and kill it, then they will be able to defeat the seemingly undefeatable Eric Draven. So Top Dollar sends his henchman Tony Todd to kidnap Sarah in order to lure Eric out. Eric figures out what's happening and heads off to the abandoned church to rescue Sarah. A fight ensues in which the Crow is injured, robbing Eric of his immortality. Tony Todd is killed by Sergeant Albrecht, who's injured by Sister Lover, who falls to her death because of the Crow. And finally, Eric transfers the 30 hours of Shelley's pain to Top Dollar, which causes him to then fall and land impaled on a gargoyle. With his revenge complete, Eric returns to his grave where he is reunited with Shelley's spirit and they return to the afterlife together. Filming of The Crow began in February 1993 in Wilmington, North Carolina. In the lead role of Eric Draven was Brandon Lee, an actor and martial artist. Brandon had previously starred in films such as Showdown in Little Tokyo and Rapid Fire, and while neither did very well critically, he was praised for his performances. Brandon Lee was cast in the role of Eric because he'd caught the eye of the casting team because of his martial arts training and physical abilities. On the night of March 30th, 1993, day 47 of shooting, they were preparing to film a scene from the beginning of the movie. In the scene, Brandon Lee's character Eric Draven returns home to his apartment to find his fiancée Shelley being attacked by a group of thugs. Eric would be shot by one of the thugs named Funboy, played by Michael Massee. Originally, in the scene, Eric would be attacked with a knife, and special effects makeup artist Lance Anderson had already made a rig for Brandon to wear in which it would appear as though the knife had gone into his chest. But at the last minute, the scene was changed from the knife attack to having Eric shot instead. 2 weeks prior to this scene being filmed, the same gun, a .44 Magnum Smith & Wesson, had been used in another scene which included a close-up of the weapon, and so the gun had been loaded with a dummy round, which means a cartridge that has had both the gunpowder and primer removed but has the bullet fitted at the end. These are generally used in close-up shots because they look more authentic. Because of money restraints, instead of buying commercial dummy cartridges, the props crew had made their own dummy rounds by taking live rounds and removing the gunpowder. Unfortunately though, they had failed to remove the primer, and so this meant that when the gun was fired, the primer had enough power to dislodge the bullet into the gun's barrel. Then, on the 30th of March, while filming the apartment scene, the .44 Magnum was loaded with a blank round, which is a cartridge that has no bullet fitted, but has both gunpowder and a primer, so when it's fired, it has the appearance of a real bullet being shot, but there's no risk of anything actually being projected out. When preparing for the apartment scene, they failed to notice the obstruction that was in the gun's barrel, the bullet which was still lodged there from the previous scene. And so, when the gun was fired by Michael Massee, the blank round shot out the lead bullet stuck in the barrel, and it hit Brandon Lee in the abdomen with the same force as a real bullet. When Brandon was shot, he hit the ground, which everyone on set expected him to do. But when he didn't get back up, the crew began to grow concerned and a medic was called. He said Brandon was seriously injured and he was rushed to hospital, where he then spent 6 hours in emergency surgery. Unfortunately though, they were unable to save him, and Brandon Lee passed away at the age of 28, 1 month before he was due to marry his fiancée Eliza Hutton. After Lee's death, the cast and crew were unsure if the film would be completed, a lot of them not wanting to return and continue after the tragic loss. But Brandon's mother, Linda Lee, and his fiancée, Eliza Hutton, both encouraged them to complete the film. They said that Brandon was incredibly proud to be part of the film and of the work which he had done on it. He had hoped that this would be a jumpstart for the next stage in his career. Whatever the reason behind it, the decision to finish the film was made, but there were numerous problems. They had lost their lead actor and Paramount Pictures had opted out of distributing due to what had happened, violent content in the film and multiple delays. To work around losing Brandon, they rewrote multiple scenes, adding in montages, narration, and completely different scenes altogether. They also had to write out a different character completely, one that was named the Skull Cowboy. They also used Brandon's stunt double, Chad Stahelski, for the remaining scenes. Chad was both very similar to Brandon in physicality and looks, but they also decided to create a mask of Brandon's face for Chad to wear, which honestly, if you see images or footage of it, it's a little eerie. The Crow was completed and released in May 1994, having been distributed by Miramax Films. It was, like a lot of movies, met with mixed reviews, some praising the acting and cinematography while others criticised the characters and the screenplay. But for the most part, it was a financial and critical success and has gone on to develop a strong cult following. The Crow's distinct and unique style also had a clear influence on later movies. But the movie's release was inevitably marred by the death of Brandon Lee. People found it hard to separate the tragic, melancholic events of the movie with the real-life tragedy of Brandon's death. As a horror fan, if you were already aware of The Crow, then you may well have also been aware of the so-called curse surrounding the movie. Yes, it is often considered that retrospectively because of Brandon's death, but in reality the film was actually considered cursed from the get-go. Apparently, the production crew received a written warning to not make the film, otherwise bad things would happen. Then, very early into filming, 2 of the electricians ended up having a terrible accident where one of them got 2nd and 3rd degree burns on their body and lost their ears. And then a hurricane hit, destroying their backlot set. This led to an article being published on the curse of the crow, and all of this was before Brandon Lee's death. After Lee's death, there were those who believed it was the curse striking again, and some conspiracy theorists even believed Lee to have been murdered, just like his father. Brandon Lee was the son of Linda and Bruce Lee. Now, if you didn't already know, Bruce Lee was a Chinese-American martial artist and actor. Bruce initially acted in China in films such as Fist of Fury, but soon caught the eye of Hollywood and landed a role in the Green Hornet TV series in the 1960s, and then went on to star in the first Hollywood-Hong Kong co-production, Enter the Dragon. Bruce Lee is probably most well known as a martial artist, and while he was trained and very efficient in multiple martial arts, he eventually created his own, one called Jeet Kune Do, a hybrid of martial art philosophy. Bruce Lee also taught martial arts, his students including Sharon Tate, Chuck Norris, James Coburn and Steve McQueen. Lee is often considered a pop culture icon and the most influential martial artist of all time. He's also been credited with helping bridge the gap between East and West, changing the way Asians were portrayed in American films. And through his own Jeet Kune Do, he paved the way for modern-day MMA, which, if you didn't know, stands for Mixed Martial Arts. Time magazine even named him one of the 100 most important people of the 20th century. Not bad for a guy who tragically, like his son Brandon, died at a young age of only 32. After Bruce Lee's death, multiple theories and conspiracy theories started floating around. One was that he was hit with a death blow, a martial art move which can be struck but not take effect until much later. Another was that a hit had been put on him by the Chinese mafia because they believed he had used his position in Hollywood to betray Eastern martial arts secrets with the West. And another was that there was a curse on the Lee family. That's right, apparently some, perhaps even members within the Lee family, believed there was a curse on them in which they would lose their eldest son. Bruce himself had an older brother who had died in childbirth, and then Bruce passed away at too young an age. What we do know about Bruce Lee's death is that on July 20th, 1973, while spending time with a producer and a colleague, he complained of a headache, was given a painkiller, and went for a lie down. When he didn't come down hours later for dinner, the producer tried to wake him but was unable to. So they called a doctor who then tried to revive Lee, but when he couldn't, they sent him to hospital by ambulance where he was declared dead on arrival. Lee's brain had swollen by 13% and it was believed he had had an allergic reaction to the tranquilizer which was contained in the painkiller he took. Since Lee's death over the decades, other medical explanations have been proposed. One being that Bruce Lee had drunk too much water and his kidneys had failed to process it. Another being that he died of heat stroke. Lee had had his underarm sweat glands removed in 1972 and it was believed he could have overheated while practicing in high temperatures. No one seems to agree on a conclusive medical reason, but like I said earlier, with the death of Brandon Lee, it reignited the conspiracy theorists that believed Bruce had been murdered, and now they believed Brandon had met the same fate as his father. Other theories about Brandon's death included the Lee family curse and, of course, the supposed curse on the film itself. But the truth is that Brandon Lee's death was just a really tragic accident, most likely caused by mistakes and negligence. Bridget Weiss, author of the book The Crow, The Story Behind the Film, said, quote, "People want to cling to those sort of cursed legends. They want to have a story that kind of justifies something so tragic." Michael Massee, who played Funboy and who had been the one to fire the gun at Brandon, apparently never watched The Crow, and after filming completed, he returned to New York and took a long break from acting. He did eventually act again, but in an interview with Extra in 2005, he said, quote, "I don't think you ever get over something like that." Massee passed away from cancer in October 2016. So there you have it, guys, the true story of the tragic event which happened on the set of The Crow, the untimely death of Brandon Lee. As always, let me know your thoughts on the episode down in the comments below, and with the anniversary of Brandon Lee's death approaching, maybe give The Crow a watch and enjoy his wonderful portrayal of Eric Draven. Also, don't forget to let me know any ideas of future Truly Horror episodes that you would like to see. But in the meantime, thank you as always for stopping by. I really do appreciate it. Take care of yourselves, and I will talk to you in the next episode. Bye guys.